Hey guys, it's Jensen, and today I'm going to be reviewing Tess of the Road by Rachel Hartman. So first, a disclaimer, I am going to try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. However, everyone has their own definition of what qualifies as a spoiler. I am going to be talking about specific plot points and elements that are established at the beginning of the book, so nothing once we get into the nitty-gritty of the story. However, if you are someone who likes to know absolutely nothing going into a book, then I'll just give you the short version now. I gave this book out 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. If you are okay with a fantasy that is not heavy on the fantastical elements, that's not heavy on the plot, but is more focused on the characters and their arcs, it has beautiful writing. If that sounds interesting to you, then I highly recommend that you check this book out. And now on to the rest of the review. So I've already talked about this book a lot in my other 2 previous videos, so in order to avoid sounding repetitive, I'm just going to go through the synopsis as I give my thoughts. So to start off with, as I've mentioned before, this is a sequel or spin-off series to the author's previous books, the Seraphina duology. However, this does stand on its own. You don't have to read the other books to read this one if you're interested in picking this one up. It stands just fine on its own. So in the prologue, we're introduced to 6-year-old Tess, and she's a bit precocious and a little bit too curious for her own good. And in the prologue and in the first 2 chapters, we're introduced to her family dynamic. Basically, Tess's mother is very spiritually devout in an archaic religion that is very purity focused, and it has that belief that sex is only for the pleasure of men, it's not for the pleasure of women, but if you remain devout and pure and just do your wifely duties, then you will be rewarded in heaven. That's kind of the basic. It's all about purity and keeping yourself clean and virginal and devout all the days of your life. So we get a sense of the environment that Tess is being raised in. And that's important to establish because it gives us a sense of the turmoil that Tess is going through at the beginning of the book because she has been living in such a repressive household. And not only is it spiritually repressive, but it is also physically and emotionally abusive. We find out in the prologue that Tess's mother is a big fan of corporal punishment, and she will use a wooden spoon to smack her children, and she uses it to make them learn their maths. There's one point where Tess is talking to her brothers about how she would be smacked for getting her sums wrong, the amount of time that she was off on her sums, and she says the record was 221 smacks with a wooden spoon. And this method of corporal punishment was not just used for when she got her studies wrong, it was also used to keep her in line. So her mother was literally beating her into submission. Her family refers to her as Spank Magnet, so we can already see that they sort of treat her as someone who is born inherently bad and is of little worth, because she just is constantly getting into trouble. So not only do we have this very harmful relationship with her mother, but we have a different sort of relationship with her father, and it's essentially a neglectful one. We get the sense that he doesn't really spend any time with his family or his daughters. In fact, at one point in the story, Tess runs into her father and he looks her right in the eyes and he doesn't recognize her. So we have one parent who is very abusive and controlling, and then we have another parent who essentially neglects, doesn't care about his family. So already we're getting a sense of Tess and where she's coming from and how she was raised. In chapter 1, we meet present day Tess, who's 17 years old now, and basically she has done something to disgrace her family and they won't forgive her for it. And she has been essentially demoted to serving her sister as her lady-in-waiting, and her whole goal in life is to match her sister up with a husband. Once that's accomplished, Tess has 2 choices. She can either stay with her sister and nanny her kids, or her family's going to send her away to a convent. I'm not spoiling anything. This is all set up in the flap. This is the beginning of the book. But Tess has 2 choices essentially. She can either stay with her sister and nanny her sister's kids and basically do that for the rest of her life, or her family's going to send her away to a convent. There is a lot of pain that we see her going through because she feels like her life is over and there's no way out. In fact, there are points where she does contemplate suicide. we can tell that there's deep emotional turmoil within her because of her bitterness, her saying harsh things to those who are trying to help her, and the fact that she uses drinking to try to numb her pain. We don't know exactly what's going on. That's something that's little Easter eggs are given throughout the book, and you don't really know until almost the very end what all has happened to Tess. But she is hurting very deeply. Tess decides not to be a victim of her circumstances, though, and she decides on the day that she's supposed to go to the convent to run away. And so she sets out on this path, and she doesn't really know where she's going, but she feels like she's headed towards something. So that's the basic setup for this book. I won't give any more away because there is a lot that goes on Tess's journey. But basically, this is a really interesting story because the author sort of uses the road to show us Tess's internal journey as she learns to forgive herself for what's happened in the past, and as she heals and as she starts to come into her own, we're introduced to the real Tess, who is kind and thinks of others before herself, puts them before herself, and makes sacrifices and wants to be good. Even though she has been raised to believe that she's inherently bad, she wants so desperately to be good and to live up to all that her family raised her to be spiritually. I love how the author just peels back the layers of Tess so we get to know her, the real her, and we just fall absolutely in love with her. She's a terrific character, and I absolutely love this book. I cannot wait to see where the next book takes her, because this is a duology. There's going to be a sequel to this book, and I'm really excited to read it. Fair warning that Tess will probably be frustrating for some at the beginning of the book. She makes a lot of mistakes. Again, she's just in a really dark place, but I think if you stick with her, you will fall in love with her as much as I did. This is a really powerful book that delves into themes like the consequences of spiritual abuse, finding your own inner strength, finding purpose outside of yourself, the power of choice, and healing and forgiveness. I absolutely loved it. Again, I'm saying that again. I think it's beautifully written. I think it will become an all-time favorite, and I really hope you check it out. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you've read this book, let me know in the comments what you thought. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and I'll see you next time. Bye.